Arnold, thanks so much for taking this day to come up to New Haven, a place that you spent some of your graduate studies here in New Haven. And it's wonderful to talk to you about museums and how you make them special places for our audiences. As Christina mentioned, you became the director of the Brooklyn Museum in 1997 and served in that role for 18 years. And when you read all of the newspaper articles about your retirement, everybody talks about how you transformed the museum, turning it towards the community and really transforming the audience demographics. So can you tell us a little bit about the Brooklyn Museum when you arrived and what those first things you were doing when you first arrived and started this transformation?
If I can remember that far back. Thank you, Hannah. And I'm delighted to be here, although this is gives a little bit of vertigo, I must say. I'd ask everyone to move down front, but that is a big job, so not do that. The reason the bird is on the screen actually relates to this. This is an ibis coffin at the Brooklyn Museum, and it is the reason I'm a museum director today. Interestingly, I was born in Brooklyn because my father was in the armed forces during the end of the Second World War, and then we moved to Manhattan. But my pediatrician remained in Brooklyn, and so whenever there was a deal I had with my mother, we either went to a baseball game, saw the Dodgers, or we went to the Brooklyn Museum, one or the other, and that was always the way the appointments were made. This ibis coffin, which was always on view, I don't remember exactly when it was acquired, but probably in the 19-teens or 20s, became my go-to object in the museum. Somehow, this about so big, jeweled eyes, gilded, became my go-to thing. If it was taken off view for some reason, for conservation, to make room for something else, my mother said, as a 6-year-old, I'd become hysterical and demand to know where my ibis was. And wouldn't you know it, the guards would comfort me by saying, they'll find out. And they would go out, that's not good, they'd leave the gallery and find out where the ibis was. And on the one or two occasions when it wasn't there, they take me to storage.
Wow.
To see my ibis. That was my introduction to museums and to the way all museums should be run. So if you have a favorite object here and it's not on view, see Hannah, and she will make sure that if you're within your viewing range within no more than 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to talk less than the visuals that you have on the screen, but I thought it would give you a better idea of at least how Brooklyn appeared early on, what I saw when I got there, and we'll continue the conversation. I'll try to answer the questions as you're looking at the screen. So don't look at me, look at the screen, please. Obviously, this is the beginning of the transformation of Brooklyn from a sleeping farm community to a population that fills up Coney Island like this in the 1940s. This is the farmland where the Brooklyn Museum was built, starting in 1895, 1897. If you can imagine, all farm, no houses, no apartment buildings, and that was built in the middle of all of that. Brooklyn was a separate city, much bigger than Manhattan, certainly in square miles, but much bigger and more dense in population, not in this area. But the museum, according to a number of people, said was built there to attract people from Manhattan and from other parts of Brooklyn to populate this area and spread out over the farms in Brooklyn. This is probably from about 1914, with a picture of, that couldn't be just staff. So I'm assuming it's visitors and staff sitting on the steps, 28 feet of steps when you talk about ascending to art, this was the greatest ascension of all. The museum, again, sometime after 1935, when the steps were removed because they were decaying, and the image of Brooklyn passed in Saturday Night Live, not Saturday Night Fever, sorry. I thought you'd be interested for moments in these demographics, 2000 to 2010. By 2010, the population of Brooklyn had become 60+% people of color due to immigration and emigration from southern states to New York. And then you see to me, the most important numbers. In 2000, in 1997, I found a museum that was already 23% composed of visitors of color. That is 20% higher than any other museum in the United States. Real estate agents would call that location, 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 because of the communities that had grown up around the museum. In 2010, I am truly delighted to say that number almost doubled to 40%. And I think in my retirement, it was about 43 or 44%. I don't know if you can see that on the big screen, but these are the areas that I wanted to talk about to answer your question. And there's a lot of words to answer a brief question, but this was our pre-1999 mission statement. I don't know how quickly you can read, but I'll get back to it in a moment. Nowhere is really the visitor mentioned, and it wasn't any different than, okay, go back one. Here's the Walters Art Gallery in Baltimore at the same time, approximately. Basically, the visitor isn't mentioned, except from time to time to educate them.
Right.
Good word. I arrived to find staff, very dedicated, long-term staff members who were set more or less at a period when the steps were still at the museum. So it was a mindset that was very difficult to change, but everyone tried. This is one of my first staff meetings, asking people to think about these words and not to apply them to the museum, but just to explain what those words meant to them. And there was a note on there to talk about labels. I mentioned to Hannah that I'd walk through the museum. We have usually had somewhere in the order of 3,000 to 5,000 works on view. Sounds like a lot, but, and there wasn't one label that seemed appropriate for any visitor to read and understand what it meant. And I suggested that they all be replaced by Post-its until they came up with better labels. This is our second meeting talking about the museum's own demographics. We were easily, the appearance was we were an entirely white museum in terms of audience, mostly female, mostly been in the museum a million times, but that was not the entirety of the audience that we were looking for. People of color, you can read, I don't have to read it to you.
So really thinking about who the audience was and where the audience could be to reflect those demographics.
And this was the all-important mission statement revision, which was the most difficult of all to tackle. I'd say the majority of the staff was not interested in changing that mission statement, except on the periphery. And I don't know if you can see, oh, it's big enough, I guess you can read it. Change it so that it included people who were in the museum, not just the mummies. This was 2 years later, after I cannot tell you how many meetings of the board, of the staff, and a board and staff together. And you can see in green, the entire mission statement was changed, but the green spells out the specificity of our interest in visitors and accommodating visitors. And this is a comparison. Again, speed readers in the room, I hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, between that first one, right, that's really all about objects, the care of objects, the research on objects, the object, and then this one becomes about the visitor experience, that the shift was really taking place. And even here we see this positioning statement about visitor friendly, welcomes everyone with its accessible and open environment, and then goes to this idea of how art, culture, and community are all related.
Well, and I promised I wasn't going to get into this because there are hundreds of slides. Hannah and I were discussing those three words, and we had designed, and my assistant actually designed a Venn diagram. These three words were applied in every Venn diagram when we talked about new exhibitions. We talked about creating new staff positions, when we talked about how to deal with the communities, the government, anything. And if the Venn circles didn't overlap, we didn't do it. If two of the three overlap properly, then we continue the conversation. If none, we're finished.
But you called this the heart, right? That those things meeting was the heart. That also gives it this like embodied sense, but also that's where the thing that you really believe in, the thing that's really moving you, that's beating the work forward.
We've talked about this a number of times, and I said, I only wish it was 20 years ago, because Hannah would be working with me in Brooklyn. This is the new plaza in 2004. And while we didn't have a lot of pedestrians on Eastern Parkway, is anyone from Brooklyn? Anyone know where the museum is? Anyone been to the museum? Oh, that's pretty good. While we didn't have a lot of walk-in traffic, except for school kids and people who lived in the neighborhood, we did have a parade that went by the museum of somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million people. Labor Day, famous West Indian American Labor Day parade. And for years, the museum was shut because of the parade. And despite the fact that I was threatened by some trustees to be fired, I opened the museum. And the first year we had some people, and then the second year we had big crowds coming in. So it was a good thing to have done, despite the fact that it was very chancy, because they were there not to see the museum specifically, but they were there as a byproduct of another event they were attending. For those who have not been, this is the front of the museum on pretty much any nice summer day.
And so really changing that facade to have this new opening and this new entrance that opened off the street.
I'll show you the most important criticism in a moment of what we've done. These, I call them the Bellagio fountains. If anyone's been to Las Vegas, they play and they do all sorts of different things and attracted crowds of people. Sometimes people never came into the museum. But that was the idea. Attract people to the front of the museum to sit there, to talk, to come into the lobby when it wasn't that nice outside. Nothing had to be paid. We were always, and to this day, pay as you wish, although there's a pretty hefty price tag. Here again, people looking at the fountains at night. And this is one thing I would like you to read. My pal Philippe de Montebello's comment about the new front of the building.
That it's taking away the majesty of the entrance, and they've taken away the majesty of the experience.
We happen not to believe in that. And so we moved along. It didn't stop us.
Well, and that kind of brings me to my question, actually, because it was during this time that I had my first job at another encyclopedic museum in New York. And I came to the Brooklyn Museum for their First Saturdays program, which was amazing. And it was so lively, and everybody was having this fabulous time, and it felt so cool and so Brooklyn, and something about the place that it was set in. And in your quote in the previous slide, you talked about it's about welcoming your neighbors. So there was this really interesting shift, I think, also that you were having a goal of making neighbors feel at home. And using the term neighbors versus visitors, I think, is also this like interesting shift in how you're thinking about what the museum was doing and what these programs like First Saturdays was doing.
We're going to switch seats in a moment because she does this much better than I did. We really talked about this program. It may have looked ad hoc, but believe me, it wasn't. Everything about First Saturday was thought out, even to the point of retraining our guards to welcome people in the galleries, not to shush people, not to tell people they're speaking too loudly, stopping people from getting too close, meaning standing 12 feet away from a work of art, control your children. All of those words that are not exactly welcoming. And I know that I'm on one side of this issue and one side very firmly, but I think the results were very clear. We started with First Saturdays. We had a lottery among the staff, how many people would come, and it was from about 100 to 500. Mine was 2,000. I won the lottery. I made, I think, $20. It was $1. Everyone had put in $1 on the lot. I made 19 because $1 was mine.
Yeah.
This was not the first Saturday, but again, on a nice day, this is what it looked like on a First Saturday. The big issue, and one I was quoted all over, because when I was interviewed by a Mellon sponsored research team, how do you engage with neighbors and visitors? And I said, try dancing. And that was requoted and requoted. But
this space was always full of people dancing and having fun and doing these things that it seemed like, oh, am I allowed to do this in a museum? And that changed how you went into the galleries and you were at ease in this totally different way, just because of dancing.
That's really, but the dancing, which every month it changed, a rock band, a salsa band. Once a year, every year, we had a portion of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra who came and played waltzes. Every time before First Saturdays, for the first few years, we had dance instructors from a gay dance instructing school who came in and provided lessons to people. And the best of all was the waltzing was always in the winter when they were appearing at Carnegie Hall. And people were in their boots and their galoshes, and they were waltzing. And you couldn't have a more wonderful experience than to watch that. Front page of the Times, the place to be on Saturday nights. And this was, I think it's either a ballet troupe or a group of, are they on their heads doing a little spinning? No, I think it's a dance troupe.
Yeah.
We started to run out of space. And so we began in May through the summer to use the outdoors. And something went viral. This is about 2010 or 2011 or 12 in the spring. And our normal number of 6,000 to 8,000 people in an evening, which is often for many museums, their attendance for a month, went viral. I don't know why. We've never been able to figure it out. The next month, it went from 8,000 to 15,000 people, and the next to 19,000. And by, I think, September, there were 29,000 people there to party and to fill the galleries to overflowing. And the next day, I was dragged in to City Hall by the fire commissioner, the police commissioner, the deputy mayor, to be scolded and told, this is not allowed. You cannot do this. The museum does not well, safety. They were concerned about, we didn't have enough fire exits on every floor because the museum has 5 floors that are open to the public. And I was told the end, either the end of this or the end of me. And my board chair got a telephone call from one of the deputy mayors telling what happened. So we had a number of conversations after that. It ended, but it started up again slowly, and they're back up to a couple thousand people. But again, we have no idea why this happened. Probably never happen again. A group of people in an auditorium for a program, and I think this gives you an idea of the kind of mix our audience was. Again, a program in one of the galleries. There's a Bierstadt on the back. One of my favorite photographs of all time during one of those Saturday nights. Again, people waiting outside because we tried to control the crowds, and businesses up and down Washington Avenue and the side streets loved First Saturday because their business boomed. And you can see this called the Butterfly Bar, inviting our patrons to First Saturday. We had a lot of conversation over these years with businesses in the area. How could we work together to attract their customers, for our visitors to come and use their businesses? And it was working. It did work.
And so we're talking a lot about the programs and the mission statement and how this is all coming together. But then it's interesting to think about how this is also manifesting in the exhibitions, the reinstallations, and how that heart is beating also in these exhibitions.
As I said, this was never ad hoc. There were planning sessions over and over, almost weekly, about what we should be doing, what went wrong, what went right, who was in the wrong place. And amazingly, during the 17 years we did First Saturdays, 17 years, whatever. We did First Saturdays, we had one incident, and it had to do with someone having too many beers. But enjoying himself all the way out with the guards helping him walk. I'm not going to talk as much because we're going to run out of time. But these were exhibitions and reinstallations predicated on this community outreach. I don't use that word because the big word and part of that word is out. So I don't use that word. Community engagement. This was in 2000. It's hard to get exhibitions to start right away because they're always planned several years out. Right. So we began in a year and a half after I arrived, and then the museum just kind of, more and more of them appeared that had been planned by us. And I think you can see a theme again, working towards inviting the Black community, brown community into the museum.
Who are the neighbors most closely kind of living in the area around Brooklyn Museum?
The neighborhood just around the museum was all white.
But a little
blocks in, it became Black and brown. And some Chinese and other Asian communities in that area as well. Mariko Mori was one of the most stellar exhibitions we ever did. And because we had a costume collection at that point, we did a lot of costume exhibitions. This was not too long after Patrick Kelly had died. And you can see we finally are being able to program everything we want. And in 2005, the first exhibition after the Whitney's great exhibition in the 1980s of Basquiat. And Basquiat, who grew up in the Brooklyn Museum, went to school in Brooklyn Heights. And one of his teachers who we interviewed said he was never listening to what I said. He was always drawing. And the floor around his desk, which was filled with pieces of paper with drawings on it. And I said, what did you do with them? And she said, sadly, we threw them all out.
Yeah.
And again, just referring to the kind of visitors that we'd have for almost any exhibition.
Consistently packed galleries.
Always.
Yeah.
Sanford Biggers, and I think Sanford was a little later, 2010?
10,
Is
yeah.
that what it says?
Youth and Beauty.
Youth and Beauty. We had, and this is directly related through the Venn diagrams. We had, both on the staff and in the community, a very large gay community. And the museum had never done an exhibition, and we had committees from every part of the community you can imagine. Never done an exhibition that had any sense of that community living around us. Never a sense. This was one of the first, and probably one of the most beautiful exhibitions that we've ever had at the museum. I wish I had more time to show you more slides. Nicolene Thomas, her first major show at the museum. Takashi, 2008. And then, as Hannah said, what exhibitions were the easy part in comparison to changing our permanent installations. American Identities was the most difficult to do. It was entirely chronological, and I would say, if I were a visitor, no interest. It was dark, it was unappealing, and it was, as you can see, we were trying to make it more accessible for diverse visitors, with more education, new interpretation. This is the moment when American art and American history, when people talked about them together, was starting to change, with new narratives being discussed. And we were very much the center of that.
And creating really dynamic galleries. I remember amazing colors of wall paint and really drawing attention and energy in different ways.
That was the biggest change for me. When I came to Brooklyn, my design chief in Baltimore called the design head at the Brooklyn Museum, and she told him, you better order a lot of squirrel gray paint, because Arnold paints every wall, the same color. Every wall is this light gray. You better order a lot of it. I think they still have about 200 gallons of gray, because 2 years later, we started
doing bright colored walls.
I changed because I had to.
Yeah. And the previous one, labels by a sixth grader in the galleries about the American art collection. And
Malvina Hoffman, who's an artist you might not know, a great American artist. That portrait sat in our storage. There was the only record that portrait had ever had being on view is the year it was acquired. And I think it was 1938 or something like that. Never been out of storage. And it's among the most appealing, beautiful portraits I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Arts of the Americas, same thing. Standard interpretation, but with a twist, because in 1923, Stuart Cullen, who was pretty much got involved in every non-Western art, talked about the arts of Africa as art and not as artifact. And that changed how all of that was presented. But this was a dramatic change.
Yeah.
And this is something you know about.
Yes.
Connecting cultures, which went into storage and galleries and brought works together that had never been seen together before.
Totally different narratives across time, across cultures, like thematic groupings that made you wonder and be really curious about, what are these two objects doing next to each other? What is a giant coffin that looks like a sneaker, and like how is that in a museum collection? And how does that sit next to classic
You've got a great memory
of American sculpture? I wrote one of my first conference papers about this very exhibition.
Another view of that. Egypt was even more difficult than American Identities, because the entire department was entrenched in the narrative that had been developed since the 1920s until the 1990s about Egypt, how it was to be presented, how it was to be discussed, and all of that has been pushed aside by so many scholars over that time period. And we began, as you said, to adapt new narratives. And the biggest of those narratives is that for many people, Egypt seemed to be an island somewhere in the Mediterranean, not attached to Africa, because it wasn't African. But indeed, it had a relationship that was very strong and very connected to the rest of that continent. And we began work to start showing that. This, of course, is the great, what's called the Wilbur plaque, one of the greatest works in the museum's collection, with Akhenaten, the champion of monotheism. And this is from about 1300 BC. And here's another way of bringing in this new narrative by having Frederick Douglass talk about the various biblical references that are always evoked when Egypt is discussed. You don't have to read the small print, but I got a little carried away when I was doing this. I hadn't done this general kind of a talk in a long time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I think in this, you're also bringing in lots of different modes of interpretation, the digital here, these connections to lived experience in the current moment, that the visitors of Brooklyn are seeing themselves in these collections and seeing their histories and their stories there. And I feel like that's such an important part of this kind of bringing together the heart.
I'm glad I don't have a script because I would have to cross out all that part.
We should talk a little bit about your book project too. I know we were going to
let me go. I'll just go through these very quickly to give you a sense of weekly programs during the week, on weekends, and then this also very quickly.
Oh yeah, amazing acquisition.
In a period of probably 10 years, less than 10 years, as I said, 5,000. I was trying probably more, like 7,000 during that period. These were 5 that were acquired.
Yeah.
Related to Egypt, Fred Wilson.
The dinner.
Everyone knows as Judy Chicago, The Dinner Party. Candy Wiley, Napoleon Crossing the Alps, wearing Timberland shoes. Great story about that. A Moroccan artist named Munir Fatmi, skateboards, and Kiki Smith's called Annunciation.
And actually, we should include in the Hugh Locke exhibition upstairs, another one of Arnold's acquisitions is the Koh-i-Noor, the head of the Queen upstairs is on loan from the Brooklyn Museum, acquired during your time. So, so you can see one in person here at the museum.
We'll go. It's a fabulous exhibition. Just point out one thing here. In the bottom 2 sections, you can see in this Mellon research, 28% of museum staffs were people of color, but only 16% represented intellectual and administrative leadership. At the Brooklyn Museum, staff was 40% people of color, but much more importantly, 42% represented leadership. They're getting smaller and smaller. I'm sorry. This is a new mission statement adopted by my successor, which talks in a very real sense of what we've been doing. Here we go.
So you've been busy even since retiring, and you're now working on this new book project about extraordinary museums across the country, America's hidden treasures. So tell us a little bit about what makes a museum, extraordinary for you in these collections that are so extraordinary.
Well,
and why that matters.
I was very lucky to get a couple grants while I was a graduate student here. One taking me all across the Midwest to look at every museum I wanted to see. Another taking me all across the South, from Texas east. So that whole section of the country I'd covered. And that was all due to Ford, I have to say. And for years, having experienced incredible, both emotional and intellectual growth going to a lot of these museums with wonderful works of art. I wondered why you never heard of them. They were never mentioned. And in my book, I talk about the highway that goes directly from the Met to the Art Institute to LA County Museum and the Getty, and then back. Maybe you stop in one or two others and go back. There are, as you may know, 35,000 museums in the United States, 12,000 of which are art museums. And I wanted to recognize museums of incredible quality that were an inch away from celebrity, that were not mentioned in most of the art guides that come out, unless they're very specific and directed. So the publisher, weirdly, I have a British publisher, had been thinking about exactly the same thing. And he'd been doing exhibition catalogs for years in the United States and actually wanted to give back during this anniversary, 250th anniversary. So we decided that I would pick out 101 museums that were, quote, hidden, in the sense that 99.99% of people in the United States had no idea they existed. Yale Center for British Art is one of them. I had 60 museum directors all over the country provide names, and I had 6 secret shoppers. I don't know if you know what that means in retail. And they did a lot of my traveling for me. And we found out that you could be 5 miles away from the Huntington Museum in Los Angeles, 5 miles away. People did not know it existed. 5 miles, let alone in Nevada or Colorado. And the same thing is true here. And I finally got up the guts to put the Brooklyn Museum in to this. And where the museum was as better known in London, Paris, Rome, than it was in any major city in the United States, perhaps forget Philadelphia and New Haven. We don't perceive how poorly the public understands the incredible nature of the cultural treasures that are available to them. And so I have a lot of friends who are not speaking to me anymore because they lead the major museums in their communities and they're not in the book.
So the Yale Center for British Art is on that list. And what for you makes this place so extraordinary? And what's your
Let me
pick?
just go through this a little bit quickly, because this is Shangri-La in Honolulu, which is the only totally Islamic design, history, and art museum in the country, as you can see. California in Sacramento. This is the California State Railroad Museum, which if you ever get to Sacramento or Northern California, it is unbelievable. And if you have children, they will never leave this museum. You can just leave them there, come back when they're 20. This was one of the locomotives that built the Continental Railroad. It went west to east and met, I'm going to forget, somewhere in Colorado or someplace like that. The one that came from the east and met. This is the Great America's Car Museum. If you love cars as much as I do, and you're in Tacoma, Washington, this is the place to go. And that's interior. In Denver, the American Museum of Western Art has the greatest collection of Western art in the country. Just a wall of every Western artist you know. And it's all salon hung because they have no space. This is in, it starts with a V. I'm sorry. In South Dakota. It's the
Vermilion.
Thank you.
Vermilion, South Dakota.
In Vermilion, this is the National Museum of Music, National Music Museum. And again, spectacular. Anyone from Des Moines? Anyone from Iowa? One of the greatest museums in the United States, the Des Moines Arts Center. Three great architects, Saarinen, Pei, and Meyer. Three great buildings, all of which are spectacular museums. This is the Pei Museum, and you can see what's in it. The Walker Arts Center, but it's not the Walker I'm talking about. I'm talking about the great Minneapolis sculpture garden, cooperation between the Walker and the city of Minneapolis. I'm outside of Detroit in Birmingham. Anyone from Detroit, Birmingham? I can't believe I'm Cranbrook. Thank you very much. That's why I love a participatory museum. What's the audience? The great Cranbrook Museum with one of the great furniture collections in the country. The Taft Museum in Cincinnati. It's a great museum, but what is really important is this foyer with Robert Duncanson, one of the first really important African-American artists in this country who did these murals. Okay, quickly. Ponce in Puerto Rico, perhaps the best collection of Pre-Raphaelite paintings in the United States, Leighton. The Tenement Museum in downtown Manhattan, Lower East Side. Just a question, how many of you have been to the Tenement Museum? Why am I here? That's fantastic.
You've got the museum fans.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now this is your backyard. This is in Farmington, Connecticut. This is Hillstead. Great, looks like any old other millionaire's country home. And it was filled with great Impressionist painting. And then the Huntington. I'm going to go through this very quickly. Pinky, T.E. Lawrence, and Gainsborough's Blue Boy. But another comparison, which I made, same room, the Gainsborough and Kehinde Wiley. They did this. I just couldn't find a picture of it, so I had to do it. Topaz. Anyone from Utah? No. Topaz Museum, which is a museum that talks about the incarceration, that's the word I'm using, of Japanese during the Second World War. And out of it, it produced a group of Japanese artists that became very well known across the entire country. This is Fremont Indian State Park, also in Utah, which it's hard to see, petroglyphs and throughout this park. And here you can see from a civilization from about 900 to 1300 AD. Near Omaha, the Strategic Air Command and Aerospace Museum. If you're anywhere interested, a place, these are mind-boggling. It goes from the Cold War until now, the new frontiers of space. 3 legacy museums in Montgomery, Alabama, which, if there is any interest in what went on in slavery, segregation, and Jim Crow, Jim Crow, it's really a must. That's the Legacy Museum, the Freedom Monument, and again, Freedom, that is Hank Willis Thomas's sculpture, and one of 2 sculptures in the Freedom Park. And this is another free at last, with thousands of names of former slaves. Oh, sorry, 2 slides of the set, 3. And the museum, the National Museum, the monument is about lynching. Very difficult to build a museum about lynching, but it's fascinating. The Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation, one of my favorite museums in the entire world. If you're in Detroit, 12 acres of Rosa Parks bus,
Mm.
the John Fitzgerald Kennedy
Limousine.
limousine,
Mhm.
and this great Oscar. And here in Winter Park, Florida, the Morse Museum with the greatest collection of Tiffany.
Mm.
Winter Park. I mean, how would you even know?
Yeah.
And the Penn Museum in Philadelphia. And I can tell you, I've been to this museum 20, 25 times. I used to date a woman in Philadelphia, who was not my wife. I would always go here before I went on a date.
Mm.
And she always wanted to know why I was late.
Mm.
And
Museums have always been this touchstone for you of like coming back to something after a centering place.
this is why I was late.
Mm.
The greatest archaeological museum in the United States, which, speaking to all my friends in New York, when you say the Penn Museum, you mean the museum, the Philadelphia Art Museum?
Mm.
I said, no, the Penn Museum.
Mm.
No idea. And not too far in Vermont, Shelbourne, with one after another, the most amazing things you can imagine. That's a 250-foot long river steamboat, which took them 90 days to bring from Lake Champlain, 2 miles away, to Shelbourne.
Mm.
One of their great rooms filled with many different things.
Mm.
But the biggest surprise is their incredible, again, collection of Impressionist art.
Mm.
And familiar territory.
Mm-hmm.
Do
And
we
us.
want it? Okay.
Tell us, why are we extraordinary?
Oh, was that the question?
That's the question.
The question is, here in New Haven, Connecticut, I spent many happy years here, and some not so happy, when I was writing my dissertation. The Yale Art Gallery was my touchstone.
Mm.
I was there every day, hours every day, thinking, looking at art. When this was built, I couldn't quite imagine the breadth of what this was intended and does hold. British art that you'd have to go to London. You'd have to go to London, to Edinburgh, to Glasgow, you'd have to go all over Great Britain and Ireland to see what's in this one building. And I happen to be a fan of British art, but I don't think that makes a difference. This is an entire civilization of artists working for 500 years. Is that about the breadth?
Yeah.
For 500 years. And it's all in one place.
Yeah.
And that so rarely exists. I mean, you go to the Barnes Foundation. The Barnes is, in a way, a mirror reflection, but a different civilization of artists. But it's so rare that it's impossible to duplicate.
Mm.
What more of a treasure do you need?
Yeah.
And it's on Chapel Street.
Yeah.
In New Haven.
And it's free, and it's open to
the public and free, and the most gorgeous. I loved Louis Kahn's museum. I had lunch with Louis Kahn twice, and felt what he was like. And I said to the director here, this was the perfection of the art gallery.
Mm.
And I believe that's really true.
Mm. Yeah.
So that answers your question?
And a special place.
A special place.
That is given meaning through the people who are here.
Sure.
We have one last thing to talk about, but maybe just in a kind of summative way, because I know some people might need to go to class or the next thing. But you know, your last book was called Sensation: The Madonna, the Mayor, the Media, and the First Amendment, that reflects on this period in 1999 to 2000, when the Brooklyn Museum hosted the exhibition of young British artists from the Saatchi collection. Lots of big fights, I guess, to put it lightly, but that really, you've talked about, you know, that moment, that everybody can read this wonderful book more about. That moment really became a touchstone for you as a director and how you thought about freedom of expression in museums, and defending the importance of the work that we do to bring art and to bring these experiences to people. So tell us about, this exhibition and why it was so important.
Well, let me say first, I never thought about freedom of expression. It was just something we did. We never thought about a problem with hanging a painting or installing a sculpture. I spent a lot of time, I must say, the first time I saw it in action, I spent a lot of time in Cincinnati. I was the president of the Association of Art Museum Directors. And when the Mapplethorpe show was presented there, and when a ton of bricks fell on them, I was there over and over and over again, speaking on behalf of the association, or actually trying not to speak on behalf of the association, and trying to help Dennis Barry, the then, I don't know what the right word would be, director of the Contemporary Museum, not to kill himself. I really thought that that was going to happen. And he was as tough as nails. But this was the power of everything just came down on the museum for no real reason at all. And that was the first time freedom of expression really hit home. And then I went on my merry way for 15 years, nothing, until several months before we opened this exhibition. And Dennis Barry was the museum director of the United States, spent more time in court than all the American museum directors combined. And I beat that record 100 times over, or at least many, many, many times over, because of one painting and one political figure who wanted to be a senator rather than a mayor. And I don't think I have to name that person. He's just been pardoned.
Yeah. And the book really wonderfully goes through this period, like kind of week by week, and how this whole situation was churning.
Well, these are just lines in front of the building. Sometimes the line's 3 to 5 hours long to get in. We stayed home until 11 o'clock at night. The guards still berate me for that. The ability to do that was because my wife took copious notes every day, every hour of every day of what went on. Every time the phone rang and it was someone telling me that something horrible had happened, I had to go to court again, meet with the lawyers. Someone had desecrated the front of our building. I couldn't leave the front door because there were people waiting for me. And I can't really see the audience, but anyone see the show in London or in Brooklyn? Okay, well, 2 or 3, that's pretty good. In London, the painting on the far wall caused all of the problems because it was about a serial murderess of children who used a model of a child's hand to compose that painting, which dissolves when you get next to it. You have to stand back to see it. And the shark, which we thought was going to be a big brouhaha, it was, but not in comparison to the real brouhaha, is now the same criticism we had from the front entrance. One of the only museum directors who said things in New York were all bad about the museum. And again, it was Philippe de Montebello. This has wound up as a gift at the Metropolitan Museum. It was called Non-Art, Stupid, Insane. It shouldn't be in a museum. It belongs to them. I tried to buy it, but I couldn't. I'm not going to go through these, but the press was all over us. There were 8 or 10 front covers of the Daily News, the Post, and I was on the front page of the New York Times, I think 8 or 9 times. After a mother telling me the only time you're supposed to be on the front page of the New York Times is when you die or if you marry someone who's more important than you are. Here is the problem. The Holy Virgin Mary, who has both Elephant dung as one breast, which in Africa, usually elephant dung is considered to be curative, something very special. And the artist uses these balls of elephant dung on many other paintings in the exhibition, on the paintings of all of his favorite jazz musicians, on paintings of all his favorite sports figures. Nothing here was meant, obviously, to denigrate the Virgin Mary, and all of the cutouts around it are female genitalia, talking about birth, talking about what is female about females. There we go. The single biggest pro audience in New York was the Black community, who became so familiar with the museum before this. This is the Amsterdam News. They campaigned unbelievably every week to support the Brooklyn Museum. And this is in Harlem. One of the smaller crowds in front of the museum, both trying to get, now this is before it opened, with speakers talking about what's going on. These were protesters for and against. And here is one who is for and votes, which was, I think, a great statement. You can see a little picture in the background of Giuliani with the little Hitler's mustache. You may recall that a couple of weeks before the exhibition was due to close, I always talked about him as a very elderly man who's younger than I am. Now, somehow we had because we were forced to, we had metal detectors at the front door, and he brought in paint in squeegees and didn't detect the plastic, and told one of the guards that he was having a heart attack. So they went to get a chair for him, and when they left, painted out the figure of the Virgin Mary. And at the end of this, Rudy, we sued him personally. There was about $30 million involved altogether with withheld funds for capital and operating, but there was also $6 million of a suit against him to try to get this done. And this was in federal court. And he did eventually pay $5.8 million, but somehow got the taxpayers to pay that.
And so I think like that whole story really shows us about how this community that you showed up for as a director, that you brought in, that you said are part of the museum, they came back and they supported the institution in a moment of challenge, and they wanted to be involved and they wanted to see these exhibitions. So, I mean, we all come together to create this beating heart of these art institutions that can transform us, can transform our relationships with others, with our own community, and with these places and these things that we hang on the wall that actually are portals to whole new worldviews. So this has been a fabulous kind of conversation, and I'll let you close with this.
Well, there's a sculpture put in place after I left, which really talks to the community. It depends on your perspective. If you're coming from the east looking west, no, excuse me, the one on your right, the yo is there. And if you're coming from the east looking west, and I don't see it on my screen, but that's Oi, and the entire Hasidic community is to our east. So what could be more welcoming?
Yes. And that knowing the place that you are from and the communities that's coming in is so key and such a wonderful thing that I've learned from you. And I hope our audience has been able to learn a little bit more about today. But I recommend the Sensation book. Let's give Arnold a round of applause.
Is there time for questions then?
Yes, maybe we have time for 1 or 2 questions. I know that some people might need to go to class or other things. So if folks have questions, we have time for
Yes.
a few. And we'll just wait for the microphone to come, for those who might be joining us on the live stream.
Hi, thank you very much. That was wonderful. My name is Emma, I'm a visiting fellow here. I wanted to point out, first of all, when you showed the walker, the sculpture garden, I live in Minneapolis. First picture we took of my daughter when she was born outside of the hospital was there in the cherry and the spoon. I've got it here for you if you want to check it out. But by Meggery, so that's.
That gives you a good place. for
Yes,
that.
it was very cold because she was born in January, but we did it anyway. My second note was like, at least I come from Spain, at least in Spain, the Brooklyn Museum is known as the cool museum in New York. It's cool museum in New York. I know, I collaborate a lot with the Prado Museum. I know they're doing a great effort to try and bring in Madrid, there's the Latino and Hispanic communities are growing very quickly. They're trying to integrate those, but they're having lots of problems to make the Latino and Hispanic communities come to the museum and feel comfortable there and welcomed. And I don't know if you have any advice for the Prado Museum in that sense, because I know they're trying very hard. And they have done some progress in the youth department, opening late at night and bringing DJs and things like that. But I think it's still difficult for them to bring the Latino and Hispanic communities. And, you know, your experience is so good in that I would like to know what your thoughts are on that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. My advice is always try dancing.
Music?
Excuse me?
Music?
Well, in its place.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and then also I think just, you always talk about this kind of sensitivity and knowledge of the community that exists outside the doors, and also that this work takes time, right? This bringing new communities and new audience.
It doesn't happen overnight, and there are so many mistakes because we're very lucky in Brooklyn that we're surrounded by such a incredible multitude of difference. And other communities don't necessarily have that. But even if they don't, I really believe there is still a requirement to do as much as we can to open museums, to open other cultural institutions. Every time, which I point out every time I speak, is that the moment an institution like this, like Brooklyn, like any museum, like a dance company, a symphony, the moment they take a donation from one person and that donation is tax deductible, this becomes a public institution. That's what that grants, is the public nature and virtue. And unfortunately, all the sides of the downside of virtue. And so as public institutions, you have to understand what that word public means. And museums are getting around to it. It's taken a long, long time. And I have to say that I was still a member of AAMD, Association of Art Museum Directors, which is now United States, Canada, and Mexico. This happened because we started to get more women as museum directors and more people of color, scholars of color, museum directors of color in the organization. Because there were a few voices, mine and a few others, and no one was listening for a very, very long time. And that era is over, but not over everywhere. So, any other questions? What a great audience. You believed everything I said.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arnold.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing these questions to us, these things to think about, as we have gotten a new mission statement, that we are thinking about different ways of opening our doors. So this conversation is very timely.
Mission statements are very dangerous few words. You have to really be careful.
And we will see where it takes us. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.